Right, welcome back and thank you for staying with Business Today. Now, today we are speaking about the state of food industry in Kenya. And joining us is Joseph Choge, who is the Group Managing Director of Unga Group right here in Kenya. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Today.
Thank you for having me, Calvin.
All right, and now since you are in the food industry now, let us start from earlier on as a miller. Unga Group as a miller. First of all, the state of millers, because we did a story earlier on looking at the coffee milling industries and companies shutting down. So what is the state of the millers that we have in the country?
Right. So if I speak about cereal millers specifically, I think it's been a series of tight events in terms of stiff competition coming into the fray. As more and more smaller millers come in and fragmentizing the whole industry. So today, maize milling, for example, I walk into the market on a daily and I find new smaller brands coming in. But these people don't last for long because everyone thinks that there's a lot of money in milling.
Okay.
Yeah, but the truth of the matter is, even the large millers that are there today, the capacity utilization is so low. So we have a lot of capacity in this country chasing very few grains. Yeah. So in the end, there's a lot of inefficiency within the industry, hence lack of profitability across the industry. So this is a tough one, and every day I see smaller millers coming into the fray. Yeah, unless somebody is actually coming in to cut shortcuts and not follow the protocols, aflatoxin checks, paying the due taxes and all these things, then it's one of the toughest industries to be in at the moment. Yeah.
And even as you continue to talk to us about the millers and the situation of cereal millers, let us look at this technology within the milling industry. Could it be a reason for the sudden change of very many people shutting down and deciding to do other different or just to go to other different ventures?
Yeah. So ideally, I wouldn't blame it on technology, because technology is actually making it even simpler for more people to enter into the milling business, right? And especially on the maize milling side. The Chinese machines are now much cheaper. Somebody can land a couple of millions of shillings, yet we are using state-of-the-art kind of machines that would cost you millions of dollars, right? So as more and more of these guys come in because of technology, so I don't think technology is so much of a hindrance. It's the working capital that is demanded around this kind of industry. When you buy maize from a farmer, farmers want an upfront payment almost immediately. But you go to your supermarket, they want 45 days to pay you in 45 days. You want a distributor wants to pay you in 30 days. So that working capital, flow is the one that tends to kill, especially the smaller millers. And I'll tell you, for example, right now we're talking about the subsidy issue that's not been. I mean, most of us millers have not been paid from the last subsidy, right? And the smaller millers, as a result of government withholding that money, which is the working capital of most of the small millers, most ended up shutting down. Yeah, because it's actually the engine that drives this mills. So today we're also choking in working capital because we have to go through all the parliamentary process to be able to see that the millers are actually paid for the deliveries that were done during the just before the previous election. Yeah.
All right. And now let's move on to another issue and look at you've mentioned about working with farmers. And when we look at production, the value chain, it's very, very, very integral to work with farmers on the ground. So when it comes to working with farmers, what are some of the initiatives that are there to make sure that at least the farmer on the ground is really included in the whole value chain?
Yeah, Kevin, that's a very good question. It's actually to our advantage that we ensure that the whole chain is actually looped. So for today, we go to farms and we partner with a lot of farmers, especially, across the country, from in Unga we do both animal feeds as well as human nutrition. So it could be a farmer a dairy farmer, a poultry farmer. It could also be a cereal farmer who gives us maize. And it's important for us to ensure that this farmer, say for example, working capital. So I'd go to a bank and ensure that we close loop with the farmer. Bank supports the farmer. Farmer can be able to buy fertilizer, seeds, and grows the grain. Then I can be able to offtake the same, make feed or food, depending on which side of the business we are utilizing it for. If it's feed, for example, so we have the feed, say poultry feed. I send Fugo layers to the market feed. Then the farmer takes care of the chicken. Then he or she has eggs. How do I help that farmer secure market as well? So that's the kind of chain that we're trying to ensure that we're looping. So from the farm side coming to us, we've worked closely with the farmer to ensure that is brought in. Now that we've taken the feed to the farm, this is the part that we're trying to close the gap to ensure that we have a ready market for our farmers. So looking into ways of, say, collecting those eggs, if it's a capon from the broilers, how do we take them to direct them straight to the market so that the farmer doesn't have the headache of thinking, where am I going to take this produce? All
right. And some of the challenges, especially when it comes to working with farmers, because you cannot work with all people the same way. So what are some of the gaps when it comes to getting to the ground and getting to the farmers, especially in those remote areas? Because products end up, or the produce always sometimes ends up being destroyed, especially by a lack of good storage or lack of accessing the market. So how do you get to the people who are in the very remote areas?
Calvin, post-harvest losses is a real issue in this country, and it's something that needs to be addressed on a bigger scale. However, today, to make it efficient for any miller or food producer, there has to be aggregators on the ground. So we would prefer to work with either cooperatives or people who aggregate from farm to farm. That way it's efficient for us to go and collect from a central point. If we said that we are going, somebody has 10 bags, somebody has 5 bags, then it will be so inefficient. By the time we are bringing the maize to the mill, then that cost of just collating the grains is already overshot, so that the end produce cannot even be affordable to the consumer. So we try to be as efficient as possible. So that's the biggest challenge that we face today. And it's good when we find a group of women or men or generally farmers who've gathered together and seen how to be able to aggregate their produce. Then given that they don't have to probably go through the middleman, we go to them to the aggregated point directly, they can be able to fetch a better price. So that's been the biggest challenge, and that's what we try to encourage farmers to ensure that they themselves come together and aggregate so that we pick at one point.
All right. Now let's move on to this other side and look at now the food, being a food company. First of all, going into the food industry in Kenya is something very, very... there's no one in Kenya who doesn't love food, I believe, or there's no human being who doesn't love food. So at the end of the day, when you get into this space and say, okay, we want to go into the food industry and we want to make sure that at least we thrive in the food industry, first of all, what goes into even planning to start a company that deals with food, or transitioning to a company that deals with food?
I think we are at a good position because we already set up as a milling business since 1907. So that's 1908 actually. That's 115 years of heritage. Now, having that, so I assume your ugali is still food, eh?
Yes, it is.
So we're still in that food space, but known as a milling company. But the question is, for us to hand over the baton to our children the next 115 years, milling will not be sustainable for any business, and for the reasons I gave earlier. So we have to morph into a proper food company as an entity. So which means And there are very many occasions of eating. So it's a question of us choosing where do we want to play as an entity. So it's not been the hardest thing for us to do. I think we've launched a few products so far, and a lot more coming in the near future, as we try to ensure that we are a one-stop shop, a basket for you for most of your food items in the house.
Okay.
So that morphing shouldn't, I don't think has been a big problem given where we are coming from. Yeah.
All right. And now let's also look at the food industry in Kenya and try to see some of the areas that we need to also explore, especially when it comes to the food industry. From your research and from the various projects that you're doing, when it comes to the food industry in Kenya, what are some of the areas that are not tapped into? Yeah,
so the Kenyan consumer is becoming more and more health conscious, right? Consumer. So I know most companies today have been, supplying whatever food that is available and the consumer wants. But as the consumer morphs as well, the tastes and needs of a consumer changes, then it's up to us as food producers to adapt as well.
Yes.
So, things like organic farming that needs to come, so that guys can get organic food, more healthier, varieties of food. Yeah, so those are some of the dynamics that are now changing. It's a question of how we adapt to that. For example, convenience foods. Today, most of the time, and especially the young millennials as they come into the job market, I don't know, they've been called the microwave generation, right? They want to just press that thing.
Yes.
So how do I get something healthy, pre-cooked from our factories that can be put in the hands of this young Gen Z, who can be able to just go into the microwave, click, and it's warmed and is ready to eat. Those are the adaptations that we need to do as entities, to be able to be relevant into the future. Yeah, and that's what Unga now ascribes to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And now let's also look at the various products, and especially when you go to the supermarket, you look at very, very many food items.
Yeah.
And now with fuel prices where they are, we are looking at the prices. Of course, food prices have always been increasing for the past few months.
Yeah.
So how do you come into this space and say, okay, our products are going to be ranging between this? What informs the price, and also what informs where you need to sell the various products?
Yeah. So I'll probably start off in what informs the price.
Yes.
So today, Nandi, like you've rightly put, cost of fuel drives a lot of things in this country, because in terms of machinery running, in terms of distribution, trucks going around, all these are affected by the prices of fuel. Yeah. But what is integral for any producer or manufacturer is actually to start from the sourcing bit. That is backward integration for us. How do we partner with the farmer and be able to collect from the farms directly, so that we try as much as possible to avoid the middleman coming in, who tends to escalate the prices. So that efficiency that I'm getting for being direct with the farmer, that's the same one that I'm going to pass to my consumer. That's how you get the prices as much as affordable as possible. The other important thing for us is capacity utilization, which I was spoken about earlier. As long as guys you're using your machine 20, 30%, 40%, you're unable to dilute your fixed costs enough. Yeah. So how do industry, it's a question we even need to challenge the industry. Do we consolidate some of these technologies? Must all of us start milling? I'm milling here, you're milling there, everyone is milling all over the place.
Yes.
Why don't we have 3 or 4 great millers using 97%, 100% utilization, and the rest, go to the market, compete on brand and customer service? I think for me, that's the future of the food industry, to make it as efficient as possible. Yeah.
And also the issue of food security.
Yeah.
Of course, when it comes to this subject of food security, it is something that has been repeated each and every year. We look at, okay, this is what we need to do in order for us to maintain food security. What do you think is usually the problem? Because food security is always a subject of discussion, and you, as now in the food industry, What do you think is the problem?
So I'll say, first of all, we've been unfortunate from a drought perspective. I think Kenya has been hit. I think the last 4 years has been some serious drought.
Yes.
So as much as farmers have planted, the rains have not come in plenty. So we can debate whether it's us who've punished ourselves by cutting trees, all these things, the reason as to why, but drought has been real. Okay, so that's one of the contributors. And number two, which is a fundamental issue that requires actually a government policy, is the land fragmentation that is hitting our country. If we want to be food secure into the next century, that needs to be checked. Where I come from, I was born in Trans Nzoia, in Kitale. When I was born, I'm not very old, but the land, one guy would have a massive piece of land. Today I go, everyone has a point of an acre. A point of an acre, 1 acre, it's small pieces all over the place. You can never do any mechanized farming, any efficient farming in this kind of things. And more often than not, the smaller pieces of land that have been, fragmented are building real estate. So it's no longer about farming, efficient farming. That is something that if we don't check now, we'll have to be net importers of food. Probably for our children or our children's children will just be net importers of food. That has to be checked. But I like what the government has done as far as fertilizer subsidy is concerned. Input, subsidizing input as opposed to consumption is the best thing that you can do. And that encourages the farmer. And you can see this year, I think the crop is much, much better. If you go to the North Rift, South Rift, the crop is much, much better. And that's because farmers actually, took the advantage of the subsidy, applied the fertilizer, and you can actually see a good crop. The only worry again is the natural calamities. Now I hear El Nino coming in to the fray, So that's a bit scary. I saw some hailstones hitting a place called Ziwa with the wheat and some maize. And right now is when they are putting them in stacks so that the maize can dry. Then this, with such rains, then comes, the issues of aflatoxin now can come in because the maize soak in water and they go bad. So now those are the challenges that we have at the moment, which is affecting the bumper crop that we were expecting.
Right. Even as we look at those challenges and trying to make sure that at least we cushion ourselves, when you look at some of the stakeholders that maybe you're working with and also other farmers within the food processing value chain, when you look at trying to solve such problems, and trying to make sure that at least by the end of the day, everyone from both sides gets the satisfaction that they need. What is it that you think can be put in place, or some of the initiatives that maybe the government can come up with, and also policies to make sure that at least when such a disaster happens, there is some sort of cushioning that comes, because the natural disasters, they are usually there. So what do you think can be done in order to control this?
So you see, what the farmer needs at the moment is that extension service that goes to him to ensure that even as the crop is being prepared for harvest, how do you best protect it from the natural effects that is going to happen to it? And for example, most farmers don't have dryers. Can a government or even private sector, some of us, come in and put dryers across strategic locations, so that these farmers, instead of the maize getting wet and going bad, can they be brought into the dryer so that they can be dried in good time, so that we avoid any post-harvest losses, right? Now, when it comes to pricing, for example, it's a catch-22, because when I sit here, the question I normally fear from you is, when will you get Unga to 100 bob, okay? And then I also sit with a farmer, and the farmer wants his profit and loss account to make sense. He wants a positive P&L. So today, I'll say, for example, how much should a bag of maize in the next harvest be for that farmer to be happy, the miller be happy, and the consumer can also get the maize flour at an affordable price? That's the $1 million question. Because today, you're being pulled on this side to ensure that you reduce the cost of consumer product, But when somebody goes out there, they are making noise and telling the farmers, make sure you reap the maximum you can. So it's simple. The government is doing a good job today in ensuring that they get subsidized inputs, some good farming teachings to the whole farming populace, so that they can reduce post-harvest losses, and they can also have a bumper harvest. When there's more grain, then the prices tend to come lower. It's demand and supply kind of equation. Prices tend to come lower, but the P&L of the farmer would still make sense, because the inputs in terms of fertilizer, in terms of seed, in terms of all these herbicides have been taken care of. Yeah, then that way the whole supply chain benefits.
Okay.
I am able to get input at a much affordable cost, and I'm able to pass the same on to the consumer. Yeah.
All right. Even as we come to a close of this conversation, first of all, let us look at let us just look at in the next coming months, or in the next coming maybe years. Let us look at months. Now we are in 2024, for example. The food prices, what are we looking at in terms of, are they going to reduce? Are we looking at especially the basmati, those grains that we have on the supermarket, on the shelves, the prices? What are we looking at in terms of the reduction or increase from your angle?
So from my perspective, if I start, in Kenya, food is synonymous with ugali. Yeah. If I start from there, the fact that we are headed into the harvest season, October, November, it all depends on how this El Nino affects the harvest. The hope is that the crop is not destroyed.
Yes.
And that way, because of the volume, like I told you, the crop has been good. Because of the volume, then prices would tend to come down. Yeah. And so would the prices of other cereals, like the rice you're talking about, and there's been import by government of the same duty-free to be able to cushion the consumer around this. So in the short run, I see we are headed towards if all everything constant K, stays status quo, then without the bad the rains, the El Nino hitting hard, then I think we should be able to take care of that.
Okay.
Then I think the prices will tend to slide down. But the wheat not necessarily, because it's they've started going up and it's pegged on international prices. And as you know, Kenya imports almost 90% of its wheat.
Yes.
Yeah, so we are affected by forex fluctuation and that exposure by the forex, the foreign market. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Joseph, for joining us on Business today and giving us your insights when it comes to the food industry in Kenya. All right, we've come to the end of this conversation right here on KTN News, and we've come to the end of this edition of Business Today. My name is Kelvin Nyakundi. Mbiu ya KTN is coming up next. Don't go too far.